Hey, my name's Rich Litvin, and I'm one of the authors of The Prosperous Coach. And today I'm really fortunate. I get to interview and have a chat with Michael Bungay Stanier. I met Michael years ago, one of the most creative people I know, and he's written an awesome little book called The Coaching Habit. Say less, ask more, and change the way you lead forever. I wrote an article about coaching which gave hundreds of different coaching questions. And what Michael's done is the opposite. He said, I'm taking the seven most important things. And he's written a book that just drew me in. It's one of those books that I couldn't put down. When I got it, I read it in one sitting, went back, read it again. It's a really cool book. I want to tell you about who Michael is, and then we'll cut to the interview I did with him. In the interview, I tell you who he is for me, which I love to do. Here I want to give a bit of his official bio. He runs a company called Box of Crayons. It's a company that helps organizations all over the world do less good work and more great work. Core distinction if you're a coach, a great book to pick up. Box of Crayons are known for coaching programs. He works with leaders in organizations. He calls them time-crunched managers so they can coach in 10 minutes or less. And here's the fun piece about Michael. He left Australia 22 years ago. He was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University, where his only significant achievement was falling in love with a Canadian, which is why he now lives in Toronto, having spent time in London and Boston. The guy's a funny guy. He's written lots of different books. You'll hear us in the interview talk about this book called Malaria No More, a book that made almost $500,000 to help eradicate malaria from the planet. He was Coach of the Year, the first Coach of the Year in Canada. And he tells some funny stories about being banned from his high school graduation for the balloon incident and being sued by one of his law school lecturers for defamation. And then he finishes by saying, Michael wrote this introduction himself, so you should take it all with a pinch of salt. Look, the guy is a creative. I love spending time with creative people. And he's written a book that will have an impact on both you as a coach, and if you work with managers in organizations, on them. If you work with leaders in organizations, it will give them insights on how to help their managers work with their people. It's a really damn cool little book. So I'll cut from here in a second straight into the interview. Here's what I ask of you. As you listen in for how does Michael show up in life? What distinctions do you hear from this man, this thought leader in the world of coaching, this man who makes a big impact on the planet by taking on big goals and big projects? What distinctions do you hear that feel powerful for you? And then how are you going to apply just one of them after you've watched the interview? Because for me, this is only ever about application. This is not about information. You can hear this stuff anywhere else. You can read books elsewhere. Listen out for a distinction or an insight that shifts things for you. And then ask yourself how you're going to apply it. Here we go. Here's me and Michael. Well, hey, this is an exciting moment for me because I get to have a chat with someone I've known for a few years who, whilst we know each other slightly, Michael's interviewed me before, Michael Bungay Stanier, who I'm going to be interviewing today, has been a role model for me, really, Michael, in this world of coaching. You're up to good stuff. I'll read some of your bio out in a moment, but I said to you earlier, I like to speak people into the room.
Right.
And who you are for me is, in one word, would be creativity. And you just have such creative ideas. I love watching what you're up to. It's not a surprise. I think it was Michael Neal who told me that you were the man who helped create the stuffed crust in the stuffed crust pizzas years ago.
I did play a small role in that, which actually got me out of that particular gig, because I was like, if that actually turns out to be my legacy work, then it's been a disappointing life so far. So, nice. But yeah, I do have that as a trophy / scar.
and that's like the heart of it for me. You're about creativity. Who you are also for me is a man. When I was putting my book out there in the world, my book is called The Prosperous Coach. It was about how to build a business as a coach. The bit that people say they're teaching you, but all they're doing is teaching you internet marketing.
Yeah.
And Steve Chandler and I wrote a book about how to one conversation at a time build a practice. What I loved about you is you said no to me. You said, I don't know if you recall this or not, you said, actually, I don't want to give you an endorsement for the book because that's not my audience. I work with managers. I work in the corporate world, and I really appreciated that, the way that you said it was a gracious no, but it was a clear no. And I got the same from Seth Godin, same from Steve Pressfield,
right.
three great people who said the same thing. And I really honored you for that, and I've never forgotten it because it felt good. It felt good to receive a no because it was a really solid and grounded no. You knew what you wanted, you knew who your people were, and you didn't want to compromise.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So those are pieces inside of me that have always stuck with me about who you are for me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's certainly, I think creativity is part of the DNA for sure. You know, I like to, one of my values is around being provocative. Which has got creativity built into that. You know, it's not the essence of the value itself, but part of being provocative is about understanding what way the river's going and seeing if you can go the other way in some way to stir things up. And you know, I love that you remember that no, because honestly, it's one of the things I struggle most with. Because you know, I like to be liked. I like people. I like to be helpful. But it's just one of those lessons that some people learn faster than I do, which is your yes is valueless without the strong no that comes with it, the no that gives it the yes, the shape and the form and the backbone. And I have good moments, like perhaps with you, where I was like, you know, I can, in a clear way, because I know you a little bit and I know that you'll hear the no in a generous way, I can do that. And then there's other times, I just a week ago said no to a piece of work, and my wife, who's my business partner, who's out there, you know, her job is to berate me every time I fall off the no wagon. And she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh man, I got distracted, and then I was back doing this again.
Yeah, I get it. I heard a line recently, I forget where it's from. What's helped me to be as successful as I am today is saying yes to almost every opportunity. And what will help me to get to be as successful as I want to be is saying no to almost every opportunity.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's real truth in that, which is, I think, I know for me anyway, finding a path for me was about saying yes to a bunch of stuff, because I'm like, hey, this could be interesting, this could not be interesting. You know, Jim Collins from Good to Great, well, one of his later books, and I can't remember which one because they've all got titles that sound vaguely the same. So, but his gift is metaphor, and the metaphor he used about kind of wise strategy was bullets and cannonballs. I don't know if you know this analogy, but his piece is, look, when you're pursuing a path, which is another way of saying creating a strategy or creating a positioning, what you should be doing is firing bullets, first of all, because bullets are low risk, low cost, and what you're trying to do is figure out where the target is. Once you find your target, the goal is to fire the cannonball. And his perspective is that people often fire the cannonball too early. You know, they get the business idea and they're like, that's it. Load up the cannonball, you know, invest everything in it, fire the cannonball, and then you find out it's not viable, you don't actually like doing it or whatever it might be. Or they wait too long to fire the cannonball. You know, they find the target, but then don't have the courage to say, right, well, if that's the target, this is what it means to be fully committed to that.
I like that. That's a good distinction. I'm playing out in my own life now, seeing where I fire too early.
Where you cannonballed and where you haven't.
Exactly. Well, let me give context to where we're talking today.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to save your bio and edit it in later, and because this is what I wanted. I said to you before we started the recording, you messed me up, because I love to do interviews, but I'm a coach, so I do it from this place that I get really present and I see what questions arise.
Yeah.
Well, you've written a really powerful book on questions.
Thanks.
And that messed me up, because I was thinking, well, I've got to ask him some really great questions, and I was writing things down. And then 5 minutes before the phone call, this session, I just said, you know what, forget it. Let me be really present. Let me connect, and we'll see what comes.
I prepared a short number of scorecards here, and I will be rating every single question you ask me. So far you're averaging about 6.3. So the only way is up from here, Rick. It's all good.
I'll keep going. Let's
exactly.
push it on. I love the book because I wrote an article a few years back, and the title is something like 121 Powerful Questions for Coaches.
Right.
and you took the opposite approach. You said, I'm going to create a book with the 7 most powerful questions that there can be. So the coaching habit, which is another piece about working the word habit in, coaching habit, say less, ask more, and change the way you lead forever.
Well, it's interesting. Let me just jump in if I can, Rick, because this kind of makes a connection back, I think, to who do we serve? Because I think we serve people who sound the same, but they're different. I mean, if you're a coach, I know when I did my coach training, what I realized in retrospect my coach training was it was a gathering of great coaching questions. I'd watch the people teaching me or the people coaching me, and when they asked a question that landed or kind of had that impact, I'm like, yeah, I'll write that down, because that's it. That's the secret of it. And I think that for the people who have coaching as a profession or as a calling, having that kind of richness and a plethora of questions to draw upon can be really powerful. My audience is slightly different. I'm trying to serve the busy manager, the busy leader who's working hard, is trying to be a good leader. They're kind of committed to themselves and their people and their team and their organization and the work, but they're struggling. They're overwhelmed. They've got a team that's too dependent on them. And if we can get them to shift their behavior from a little less advice giving and solution providing and a little more curiosity, my take on it is they will lift their game. They'll work less hard but have more impact. And so for me, it was actually, what's the least I could teach these managers and leaders that would make the most difference? Because they've got so much on. They don't have the capacity to take on 121 questions, but they might have the capacity to take on 2 out of 7 questions and see if that shifts the way that they work and the way that they lead.
When you say that, it takes me back, because that's who I was. 12 years ago, I was a leader in the educational world in the UK. I was a vice principal, and I came into coaching through training to be a head teacher,
right,
being trained in coaching skills. And you're exactly right. It was, how do I use this with my teams? How do I use it when we don't have time to do this? I'm trying to tell you what you need to do. We're looking at these targets.
Yeah.
How do I have time to be with you? And so that's your intention, right? To create that.
Very much, yeah.
There's 7 cool questions too. I watched your interview series for years, and my favorite question has always been, what else?
Yeah.
And it's in there. It's one of the questions, because it's like, go deeper, go deeper, go deeper.
Yeah. Well, that's, the pattern about, there's 2 things that I'm trying to help folks change, 2 patterns of behavior. The first is, honestly, just a little less advice giving and a little more curiosity. And, in my experience, people don't even realize how keen they are to offer up the answer. And it's embarrassing. I've been doing this for years now. You'd think I'd know better, but I can feel it. Somebody starts talking, and I'm like, oh, here we go. Here's my opportunity to be smart, to add value, to give the answer, to take control. It all keeps showing up, and being able to resist that, not forever, but just for a while, can really make a difference. But the second behavior change, and it's related, is the shift into action. Because we're so busy that we think that the solution to that is the sooner we can get going on stuff, the better. And the symptom of that is that when people ask a question, they assume that the first answer is the real answer. And sometimes it is, but almost never. So really, part of that power of and what else, it's not just going deeper, although that happens as well. But the other 2 benefits of it that I can see, the first is it kind of supercharges a question. So if you've got the Rich Litvin's 121 questions, well, look, ask a question, but then ask it again and again and again, because there's more there. There's more to tap, and it will be an enriching conversation. But you also kind of get your full money's worth from the question that you asked the first time.
Yeah.
But the second thing that's so great about it, and what else, particularly for the kind of twitchy people amongst us, me included, is that it slows down the rush for you to leap in. So, the principle behind the book is be a lazy coach. And when we talk about that with people, you can see people react to that, which is, I didn't get to be a vice principal, almost a principal, by being lazy. I got there by being dedicated and focused and working really hard. But it's it connects beautifully actually to what you were saying before, which is it served you up to now. It's going to stop serving you now. Now it's like, how do I be lazy? How do I work less hard for my own sake, but for the sake of the people I manage and lead as well?
What goes along with that is, you call it say less. For me, it's the power of silence. It's not even a question, but it's that willingness to bite your tongue. Especially, I teach coaches, like, bite your tongue. If you feel the urge to speak, then it's your stuff, not theirs. Hold it. I think I've been paid more to say less, to say nothing, than for anything else I ever do as a coach.
So how do you help people with that? Because there are lots of us wired to be anxious with the silence, and not very much silence. It's like half a second silence, and we're like, oh my God, it was a terrible question. They didn't understand it. I've got to fill the space. I mean, short of literally getting people to bite their tongue, what are other ways you help people become comfortable with the ambiguity of silence?
It's a good question. You take me back to being a teacher, funny enough, of all things, because as I was training teachers are terrible. They'll ask a question, and it's less than a second before that silence feels so uncomfortable, they're on to the next kid.
Right.
If you think slowly, if you think differently, if you're pausing for a minute to gather your thoughts, the teacher's already moved on.
Right.
So they reward those kids who speak up fast.
Right.
And anyone who thinks differently, and that's what you want, creativity, right? You're looking for you're looking for people in your teams who think differently.
Yeah.
So how do I do that? I talk about, it's your willingness to feel uncomfortable as a coach that is part of the key. Go on, that stirred something for you, I think.
Well, it does. I mean, it taps into something I believe really deeply, because the book's just come out, so I've been doing a number of interviews like this. And, one of the questions I get asked is, why is it so hard to just ask a question? And, in part it's a simple answer, which is it's a habit. We've been praised and rewarded for having the answer since we were at school through our working careers. So, of course, that's a default response. But what I like where you're pointing to is the discomfort of, you could call it servant leadership. Because when you have the answer, even though it's likely to be the wrong answer, or at least not the right answer, it's likely to be not listened to that much, it's likely to be not acted upon, for all of that, giving an answer feels pretty damn good. Because I am the smart person in this relationship. I have status. I have control of where this conversation is going. I know the path of this conversation, and look how I'm adding value. Okay, so I'm self-reinforcing my sense of a adding value sort of guy. Yeah. As soon as you ask that question, you step into this place of ambiguity of, first of all, handing control of the conversation to that other person. This is empowerment. Empowerment is giving up power so others may take it. So you have that, and then you go, wait, was that a good question? Are they going to answer it? Are they going to give me a good answer, or some crazy ass answer that may go, who knows where? Will I be able to respond to the answer? What does it mean that they haven't answered it even after, a whole 3/4 of a second? And so you're in that place of ambiguity and discomfort. And, on a neurological level, we're wired to avoid that. I mean, we just don't like that. We love certainty. We love clarity of expectation. So the learned discipline of sitting with silence and sitting with the ambiguity that comes to it goes against our neural wiring, the things that have allowed us to survive at a really primitive level. But the good thing is we now live in a world where practice and discipline means that we can elevate our response beyond the instinctive to one that serves the situation more successfully.
Yeah, practice is part of the key of this. It's just that willingness to feel discomfort and then push the boundaries what feels comfortable.
Yeah.
Do you know Michael Neal's story about the coach and the carpenter?
I don't think so.
So a man goes to see a coach, and the coach says, how can I help you? He says, I'm a carpenter. Will you help me grow my business? And the coach says, yeah, sure, of course I can. I think you need a social media strategy. You need a PR person. We've got to help you write a book. You need to be a thought leader in your arena. Right. And all these, and the coach, the client says, thank you, that's awesome. And an hour later, the carpenter stands up, is about to leave, and the coach says, oh, you know what? I forgot to ask your name. The carpenter turns back and looks at the coach and says, my name's Jesus.
Right. Nice.
We're not looking for who the person is in front of us. We're looking for our expertise. I know this. I've got the answer.
Right. Yeah,
One of the premises that I believe in as a coach, our job is not to answer the question that the clients come with, it's to help them to live into more powerful questions.
Right. And it's because most people don't come with the deeper question that they're wrestling with. And one of the biggest shifts that we see in the work that we do is just to help people see how the presenting challenge is actually not the actual challenge. I mean, it is sometimes, but it's a really rare moment. And even if you just spend a few moments testing that out, and you come to the conclusion that somehow they had shown up with a perfectly articulated challenge, fantastic. You've just made sure that's a little more robust than it might otherwise have been. But almost always, staying curious about what the challenge is shifts the challenge and shifts the nature of the challenge.
My experience in working with leaders in that world is two things tend to happen for me. Either they discover, or they already know, it's not the right world for them. They want to get out of corporate somehow.
Right.
Or they get in touch with the contribution they want to make, the difference and the impact they want to make, much deeper level, which has them be more passionate about staying there because they're there for a purpose.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would say that that really can be, and I think probably should be, the outcome when you're working with an executive coach, when you bring in somebody there, because my take on it is, if you have the privilege to be coaching somebody at that level, you should be getting them to wrestle with the big questions, which is, what the hell am I doing here? Or, okay, if I'm here, what the hell am I doing here? How am I going to rise to that challenge and connect to that great work idea, or find a way to get out of here? So I think that's exactly the right place to be wrestling. What I noticed in the work that we tend to do is, when we're training and working with managers and leaders, we don't tend to get to that exalted space, because it's more about knowing the work that you've got in front of you now. What's the work that needs to be done? And the shift that happens in the conversation tends to be a more subtle one. The third question in the book, we call it the focus question, and it's simply, what's the real challenge here for you? And actually, over the years, I've really become attuned to the construction of that question, because here are some alternative ways of framing it. You can see how this final way is a more powerful one. You could just ask, so what's the challenge here? And that's going to get a certain response. It will often be a kind of quite fast, quite easy, slightly glib response. Then you go one level deeper. What's the real challenge here? And you can already feel that if it's a real challenge, I can't just give you the first thing. I've got to kind of weigh up options before pointing to the thing I think is the real challenge. But then if you add those final two words, what's the real challenge here for you? And by adding the word for you, something kind of magical happens, because suddenly the conversation shifts from a focus on the challenge to a focus on the person who's dealing with the challenge. And that actually becomes a more profound moment of learning, because when you ask people, think back on a time when you were well coached, a time that made a difference. It's when they've gathered that moment of insight about themselves. They've seen a pattern that they need to break. They've seen how they need to get to the next level. They've gained some sort of insight about who they are in this world and what that implications of that are. But if we spend our whole time fixing the thing, that insight doesn't come. But if you just add the words for you onto the end of questions, that starts shifting that focus back to the person, which is where the profound insight and change actually happens.
I like that distinction around the particular group of people you work with. You took me back to being a time-crunched manager, as you talked about it myself. I remember reading a book that said, you need to go to the person who's your leader and say, look, you give me all these projects. Which one do you want me to take off my agenda so I can complete the others?
Right.
And the boss looked me in the eyes and said, none, I want you to do them all. I mean, it was complete, just like, no, just make it happen. It's your damn job. It was that energy. And so all these books about creative ways.
I know, exactly. They're all full of good advice. It's like, take my advice because I'm not using it. In theory, this should work really well. In theory, your boss should go, good question. Why don't we eliminate these two so you can bring your full focus? And the truth is, they're like, look, my boss's boss's boss told me to get this stuff done, so get it done, okay? This isn't a self-discovery conversation. This is grinding it out. Yeah.
Yeah. What did you love most about this book? I read your post. I think you put it this morning. You wanted this to be. You had this vision of being a $15,000 book,
A
gold
$15
jewels.
million book. I mean, I was like, yeah, when I got this idea, because, the whole thing about a book, this as well as I do, which is it's one thing to write the book, and that's hard, particularly to write a book that is a really good book. But then you've got to, that's just one finish line that you cross. Then you've got to market the book. You've got to get people to actually buy it and read it and be interested in it and pass it along. So you've got to think about the marketing side of it. And Kickstart is an interesting kind of phenomenon, and I was like, okay, maybe a Kickstarter campaign. And then I had this idea that I was like, okay, I'm going to turn this into being the most expensive business book in the entire world. So I was going to be inspired by the British artist Damien Hirst, who created this sculpture called Memento Mori, which is just, a 15 million pound skull made out of diamonds. I mean, it's insane. I was like, ooh, I'm going to turn my entire book into this diamond covered. It's going to be fantastic. Anyway, everybody hated that idea, and it has to be said. One of our corporate values. I'll hold this up. You can see it. It says "tread lightly," and I was like, "No, it's a really good idea." And finally, Marcella, my wife, went, "Okay, so how does that work with our whole idea of treading lightly?" I'm like, "Damn it, damn corporate values, and we have to live by them." So yeah, this book wasn't fun to write. The other books I've written, I mean, you held up one of the books I created some years ago called End Malaria. That was actually a really fun book to write because I was deeply inspired by the purpose behind it. We're selling it for $20, and each book would give $20 to Malaria No More. I was working with Seth Godin, so there's a kind of rush around working with Seth. And then when the book launched, we got up to #2 on Amazon.com. So I was like, so it was a great rush involved in all of this. And this book almost killed me the first 3 times or 4 times I tried to write it, because it did not come fast and easy like my other books have kind of come. The idea I had for it the first time, I just wrote a really bad book, and then I wrote another bad book, and then another bad book, and I was like, I cannot crack this book. But here's the moment that I remember most about this, which was, so I'd been negotiating with the publisher in New York who published Do More Great Work. And we've been back and forth for literally a couple of years to try and figure what this book out. And they're like, I don't like that, don't like this, don't like that. And I got tangled up really badly. So now I was trying to write the book that I thought that they might like if they like business books, which they don't like. And so I was just in this world of pain, because I was trying to, I was building on foundations of sand. There was nothing there. And then there's this moment of talking to a friend and just reconnecting to what I wanted this book to be, which was 7 essential questions, lean, beautiful, elegant, funny. And I was like, okay, that's what I want. Let me go back to this publishing company. And I just went, look, at this stage, I'm no longer invested in whether you say yes or no in this. I don't really care. I just need you to say either yes or no to this idea. One way or the other, it's fine with me. And they went, no. And I'm like, perfect. And I got to roll up my sleeves and go, right, now I get to write the book that I really want to write. And I just did a really nice job, if I say so myself, of then building a team around me who were expert and aligned. So my editor, my designer, publishing consultancy, my copy editor, my researcher, they just nailed it. And I've got a long track record of doing a terrible job at hiring people. I mean, terrible. So for me, the sweet moment was going, wow, against the odds, I've somehow built myself a really high-performing team that's helping me create a book that I can just unambiguously say, I love this book. There's nothing about this book that I want to change. It's exactly the book I was dreaming of, and a little bit better. I didn't even realize that this is what I wanted, but this is the book I wanted to create. So that's the moment.
Good. I like it. It feels good. It's a beautifully designed book. I've got a high attention on things like this. Just the fonts you've used. It's just beautifully designed. It's lovely.
Well, design really matters. I mean, it's My take on it is this, I guess, Rich. We live in a world where information is everywhere and ubiquitous and free. And so you can find out anything about anything.
Yep.
If you want information to become valuable, one of the ways that happens is through design. Design is what makes information, turns information into wisdom, because you're creating choice and elegance around that to make it accessible for people and make it valuable for people. So, design really matters. It makes me sad when you look at content that could be really appreciated and it's overlooked because it's not that it's ugly, but it doesn't have a degree of elegance to it.
Yeah, great word, elegance. I like that. Yeah, that's powerful. I want to come back to Malaria No More because I pulled it off my shelf because it's got more pages turned over than most books I've read in a long time. Really, from the point of big missions, I'm on a mission right now to mobilize $1 million through my connections to educate 1 million children.
Brilliant.
And I started saying that I started whispering it a year and a half ago. It's like, who am I to say it's crazy?
Yeah, exactly.
And then I began to say it out loud to a couple of clients, and people were, I said, cool mission. It dawned on me a few weeks ago that actually in the 18 months since I put that one out there, I went to Liberia to literally train 400 teachers and build a school, helped to raise the money for 2 schools in Kenya, helped a client to raise $4 million for his educational foundation. Amazing stuff is happening. Yesterday I was talking to a woman. We just met. I loved meeting extraordinary people. We're sharing stories. She says, what are you up to? I share my mission, this one I used to be afraid of saying. And she said to me, and these words were amazing. She went, oh, that's lovely, Rich. We did that a couple of years ago.
You're like, ah.
And it was great.
How did you respond?
I loved it. I told her, thank you so much. It's been nice having some inspiration from people, like they're inspired by this big mission I'm on. Here's someone who's just like, it was like I said, I saw The Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio. And she went, oh, yeah, that's lovely. We saw it last weekend, too. Right. It was that energy she had. It was so low energy. It was just like, yeah, of course you can do that. Anyone can. And you've done that. You've almost $500,000 on a way to $500,000 raised to do something. Who was it? I was reading Bold by Stephen Kotler and Peter Diamandis. And Diamandis says, when Bill Gates said, I'm going to give half of my billions when I die to charity, that pledge that some billionaires he said, that's a weak pledge. You need to put a stake in the ground. You need to commit to something powerful. What are you going to do? How are you going to change the planet? Yeah. And you did it. Malaria is a disease that could be eradicated. And you said, I'm going to make this happen. And I wanted to speak to you because I love hearing people up to something big like that. Tell me more. Just where did that come from? Tell me about it.
Yeah, so Do More Great Work, the book came out, I think 2010, thereabouts. And in the book, there's a encouragement for people to find and pursue a great work project. Because when you talk about the difference between good work and great work, so bad work is kind of waste of time, bureaucratic, suck you dry work. Good work is best described as your job description, so productive, efficient, getting things done, no shame involved with that at all. And then great work is that work that has more meaning and has more impact. And the challenge for most people is, how do I do a little more great work? How do I get more of that? And one of the suggestions I have in the book is define a great work project, because what that does is it gives shape to desire. And a project has a start and it has a finish, and it either works or it doesn't work, but it kind of contains intention, as opposed to kind of having good intentions stay abstract and kind of, you go, oh, maybe the rising tide will lift all boats, but you're never quite sure. So I was like, well, having now written this in a book, perhaps I should actually have a great work project of myself here, or am I going to be one of those people who goes, take my advice because I'm not using it? So I went to my local coffee shop just up around the corner here. I sat down and went, what can I do? What can I do? And then part of it was around, what do I care about? And the starting point for me was a sense of global impact. I wanted to make a difference at the kind of highest level of the things that needed to change. And where that took me was to the millennial goals, of which eradicating malaria is one of those goals. Yeah. And then I went, well, okay, well, what do I what do I believe in? What kind of gets me excited around stuff? And just raising money for a general cause, being a small drop in a bigger bucket, didn't get me as excited. And one of the things that I'm always kind of got as another little driver for me, a quote from Charles Eames: we want to make the best for the least for the most. So there's something about accessibility to lots of people. And when I started doing research, I found that the cheapest unit of change in this world is a malaria net. Because for $10 you change a life, you save a life, you save lives. And that was the easiest thing for me to get my head around, because in my head I'd already started thinking about buy a book, buy a net, or buy a thing, buy a net as an exchange, so that when you did the thing, whatever it was going to be, you could see there was a tangible outcome. My money got that net, which saved this number of lives. And then I went, well, the other things I know how to do, or at least I have, that make me a little different, is I know how to create books, and I know how to shamelessly ask people for help. And I have, it's quite an impressive list of people who contributed to the books. And I had kind of weak connections with some of them and no connections at all with some others, but we managed to kind of gather them together and make a difference. And then I went and tried to make it work with my publishing company, and I just couldn't make it work. I mean, you get into this labyrinthine publishing industry, and it's like, and they were like, my publishing house, Workman, they were like, we'll publish the first 10,000 for free for you, we'll underwrite all that cost. And I'm like, that's amazing. But we couldn't find out how to extract the money from the system. And I'm like, I don't want to spend half my life trying to track down dollars and cents through some sort of forensic accounting thing. That sounds like misery to me. Yeah. So I tried different things and basically went, God, that was so close to being a good idea, so close, and I just couldn't figure it out. But then in 2011, Seth Godin came up with this idea of, I'm going to publish 12 books in a year in partnership with Amazon, and we're going to try and reinvent or radicalize the publishing industry as a result of that. And actually the guy who was head of Workman at the time called me up and said, this might be an interesting thing for your end malaria book. Your malaria book, whatever. And I was like, maybe. So the thing is, I had a bit of a relationship with Seth Godin. He and I had traded emails a few times. I'd written him nice things. He wrote a blurb for one of my books. So I pitched him the book. He went, fantastic. And then it was just this helter-skelter of, I think, 6 months of intense work to get this book produced. And there's this moment, Rich, where we're aiming for a November launch. It's a really tight deadline because I only signed on in April. So I'm like, I've got to get all these people's, there's 60 people or 70 people's contributions. I'm editing them. I'm arranging them. It was just it was a full-on piece. And then I get this email from Seth going, so we want to move your publication date forward from November to September. I'm like, that's now like 8 weeks away, and I am traveling for 5 of those weeks. So I'm like, yeah, I'd love to do that, Seth, but really I just don't think I can. I just can't hit that deadline. He goes, no, really, that's now the publication date. I was like, I thought for a moment this was a conversation, but no, this was Seth telling me the new publication date. So I was like, okay. So it's like, I worked like a crazy man to get it across the line, but we did, and then the book came out, and as you say, it's raised a good chunk of money, and for me, certainly, it was a really lovely outcome for this kind of intention to do a great work project. And it's fair to say that not all great work projects, are as successful as that. We start projects, some of them work, some of them don't work. That's not the outcome. You can't control the outcome. You can just control the commitment to the process and what that looks like. Are you engaged? Are you courageous? Are you as fully committed as you want to be to try and make this happen? If you've got all of that, then whatever outcome shows up, you can go, I went in there with eyes wide open. I did my best. There's no shame in whatever outcome this might be.
Yeah, I hear some good distinctions in there. There's your bullets versus cannonballs. You're trying different ideas till it fits, and when it fits, you go full out.
Yeah.
You bring your courage. People always want confidence. It's not confidence as a result. Later on, you look back and you go, "Oh, now I have the confidence."
Yeah.
We rarely have it first when we're trying new stuff, right? But courage, yeah, courage. You need that. You definitely took that, and then you had relationships.
Right.
You've been building relationships for a long time. So reaching out to Seth as an example, or other people, you already had that relationship, and that's who you are, right? You're a relationship guy. That's what I get about you.
Yeah. That's it. I would love to be able to fully accept that. I think I still have a lot of work to do with relationships because what I'm good at is weak link relationships. You know that distinction between, I think they call it strong links and weak links. And, there's a lot of good research that says people who are successful often have a lot of weak link relationships, because they've got a kind of faint connection and a willingness to kind of ask and get another introduction and the like. And that's great, and that has served me well in many ways. I would love better, stronger, strong links around that piece. So I wish I could unambiguously accept your compliment as a relationships guy, and thank you for saying it. But for me, it's also a learning edge as well.
Even hearing that, though, it's still interesting for me. New concept for me about weak links, but there's their connections, and then there's this willingness to ask.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need a big mission, right? You've got a powerful enough mission, you'll ask for anything. But whatever it is, just that willingness to ask.
That I am good at. Yeah, and actually, here's my superpower. It's not asking; it's continuing to ask. I mean, I'm just really good at, asking 6 or 7 or 8 times. And walking right up to the edge of you become a weird stalker. So I try not to cross that line too often, but I'm almost certain that the first 3 times I ask somebody, they haven't got my email. It's just one that's vanished in the thing, and it's not personal that they haven't got back to me. To connect right back to where we started. What I'm looking for so often when I'm asking is just a clear no. I'm like, just give me a no. If it's a yes, fantastic, but don't leave me with an ambiguous silence or maybe, or it's like, give me clarity, have the courage to say no to me. But, I'm like, one of the best secrets I've got is I send an email, nothing. 6 days, 7 days, 8 days pass. Here's what I do. I go into the subject line and I type in square brackets, resend. And then I just write a short message, just nudging this back to the top of your inbox. It's meant to be anyway, an absolutely neutral way just to say, I'm not judging, I'm not nagging, I don't have expectations that you answer this, but I'm just going to throw this back to the top of your inbox because you may have missed it the first time.
It's a great catch. We forget that sometimes, especially with contacting busy people. One of the women in my community, she's a coach, but she used to be an actress. And she wanted to be in a film by one of the famous British director. And she wrote him a letter saying, I want to be in one of your movies, and heard nothing. And wrote again to him, and wrote again to him, and wrote every year for 10 years. And finally he called her in for an audition, and he gave her the part. And he pulled out a file which had all these letters in.
Brilliant.
And I've never forgotten that story. It's that willing that in the book we wrote, Steve and I, we call it "Yes lives in the land of no." It's Steve's phrase.
I love that.
It's yes lives in the land of no. Are you willing? If you want yeses, are you willing to receive no? Most of us, we shut down after 1 or 2 no's and we collapse. It's just too much.
Yeah, and if you can just remember that the no is almost never personal. It's almost always systemic. They could be saying no to you for any number of reasons. They don't know you, and only one of 1,000 is because they really don't like you.
Yeah, and it's the piece behind that though. It's the silence.
Right.
Silence means nothing.
Right.
We make silence mean something, but in this day of overwhelm on emails, it's easy to miss something, or easy to see it and say, I would love to get back to that person, and by the time you'd even think about it, 20 more have come in, 50 more have come in, and it's just you forgot.
Right, and email is somebody else's agenda. So, the more you get sucked into the need to answer all of your emails, the more you're playing with other people's agendas. So, you're balancing all of that.
I love this. I'd love to go more into all sorts of directions with you, but let me come back to the book, and then we'll use this as a way to wrap. We got a community of thousands of coaches.
Hooray!
Yeah. So what do they do with this book? What if you're a coach watching this? What have you got for them?
So my guess is that the coaches, your community, are full of people who are already masterful. So what's next for you? You know, what's the next level up for you? And I know for myself, when I observe people who I see as true masters, it's going to come back to that word that you and I talked about before. There's an elegance to the way that they work. You know, I think of people who if you ever watch somebody in a park doing Tai Chi, and you just go, it is so clear that you have been doing this for 50 years, because every one of your movements is precise and beautiful and wastes no energy, and the hand moves from here to here because that's the intention, is moving the hand from here to here. Or you watch somebody, you watch an Olympic swimmer, and you just go, your ability to swim blazingly fast up and down the pool, but to do it in a way that looks relaxed and effortless is just a thing of beauty. And so this book is written for people who probably don't have the level of experience that a lot of the managers in your coaches in your community have. But what it might offer is a way back to simplicity on the other side of complexity, around going, okay, if now your goal is not to add to what you have, but to hone your expertise so it becomes quieter, more profound, more elegant. What does that look like? And there just may be some insights in the book for you around that.
Nice, nice. I'm also imagining those coaches in our community who work in the corporate world finding a way to give this to the leaders, to give out to their team members.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It works extraordinarily well as a gift that you buy for your closest 10,000 friends.
Exactly. There's a book with a title, A More Beautiful Question.
Yeah, Warren Berger. Yeah.
And I love that idea of what's the beautiful question you get to ask. And it takes me back to, like, I look at my notes that I made before this call that I just put to one side because I knew, well, I didn't know immediately, it took me a while, but it was like, and I even played with, like, I'll ask him the questions he's asking. Let me send it back to everyone. Everyone's going to do that game. But I realized, if you had that already.
I have had some of that, yeah.
And I realized, no, I've got to, like, this is how, I'm a coach, this is what I do. I get really present, and we see what arises, and we go where we need to go.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Sometimes what happens in a coach, there's a place where you're called to speak and you say something. It's not always about asking the most beautiful questions. Sometimes it's about being inelegant. Mm-hmm. What I've also learned, Michael, is to quiet that voice in my head. Sometimes I'll ask a question, and the moment it comes out, whether it's with an interview like this or a client, oh shit, that's a crappy question.
Yeah.
I've learned to bite my tongue.
Right.
If it's not a good question, they'll either say, I haven't got an answer, or we'll move on, or they'll dive in anyway and we'll go somewhere.
Right.
I get in our way if I interrupt and go, oh, sorry, let me just change. I don't need to.
I mean, excuse me. I think one of the measures of mastery is, as you coach and you engage with people, you truly ask, for whom is this in service of? And there's all sorts of subtle ways that some questions you ask or some things you do you can pitch them as being in service of your client, but they actually are more in service of you, your ego, your level of comfort, your willingness to sit with ambiguity or not. And it's a great discipline. You ask a poor question or you go in a poor direction, and you go, in whose service is it to interrupt this? And it's a genuinely open question, because sometimes you may go, yeah, let me withdraw that question immediately because this isn't working, and I can see it's had a certain reaction with you. But I think it's an interesting place to say, well, let me just sit with it, because this is one of the glorious things about coaching. Is like when it goes to hell, it pretty much just means you've asked a question that hasn't worked that well. So it's like nobody dies, nothing horrible has happened. You just move on to the next question.
How do we support you best right now? I mean, we're buying 10,000 copies for our friends and family.
Exactly.
How do we support you best, Michael?
You know, certainly buying a copy of the book would be really gratefully received. We've got a thing set up that if you buy a copy of the book and then you email us, and there's information on the website, thecoachinghabit.com, we automatically send you a couple of nice little poster downloads that will give you a summary of the 7 questions and a question of the new habit formula, which is a big part of the book, which is about how do you turn these good intentions into regular behavior. If you have a copy of the book, one of the greatest boons for me is writing a review on Amazon.com. You know, we've had some really lovely reviews so far, and it's sparked in me an intention. Now I'm saying this out loud for the first time, so it's a little vulnerable for me, but I would love this to become one of the classic coaching books, so that when somebody says, what's the book I should read on coaching, it gets mentioned, you know, maybe along with John Whitmore or Mary Beth O'Neill or Michael Neal or Rich Litvin. You know, it's kind of like it fits one of those. This is just a book that's going to be around for a long time because it's of its value. And one of the ways that will happen is by being seen to be valuable on Amazon. So if you have a copy of the book and you're so inclined, taking the next step and putting a review on Amazon.com would be very much appreciated.
Good, I love that. I can say unequivocally, I think it's an awesome book on coaching. I had 2 books recently arrive in the mail. This showed up from you, and another book about coaching, which was full of distinctions and ideas and concepts around coaching. It was 360 pages. It was so heavy, I skimmed it. I couldn't read it. I just couldn't read it, and I love this stuff. I picked your book up.
A great look on your face as you were taking it through that. You're like, wow, it's like slightly constipated.
I picked your book up and I couldn't put it down. I literally read it in one sitting, and then I went back to it, and then I skimmed to the end, like, where's that summary? Because I love the summary. I think I might even started with the summary.
Great.
I went back, and I just it works so well, just the layout and so on. So yeah, I personally I'll put a review up because I absolutely loved it. It's been a privilege to have you with us today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Michael.